The total power of the world government. Labeled as the Illuminati, secret societies and ruling elites hold vast power to maneuver history and shape the future according to their plans. Text by Claudio Suenaga, taken from the book Illuminati, The Genealogy of Evil. In recent centuries, hundreds of authors have sought to warn that the main historical events are not merely a succession of chances or resulting from the spontaneity of their agents, or that the natural course of world events are not consequences of known political forces and uncontrollable events and fortuitous, but products of machinations articulated by an elite that operates behind political parties, revolutionary movements, totalitarian ideologies, religions and the entire economic system, deciding the destiny of humanity in our absence and imbued with purposes so appalling that they sound unbelievable. However, for the overwhelming majority of the population, the intellectual cream, the scientific academic establishment and opinion makers, it sounds naive, not to say absurd, to reason with the hypothesis of the existence of an equitable and coordinated plan that requires centuries to present practical and effective results and completely change the global political framework. A plot of this type, they think, would not accommodate the immense variety of interests and objectives of the historical agents involved, nor would it fit into the temporality of the facts. Even though the communist movement acts with a view to future sedimentation, it is clearly visible that it does not waste the opportunities offered by the directions taken by social or religious movements and does not fail to take advantage of the occasional gaps that open up in the structures to infiltrate its ideology and widen the flanks, especially in the poorest sections of the urban and rural populations. Investments are relatively low in these cases and the fruits, that is, the capitalization of political dividends, pay off in the short term. Conspiracy theorists, as they are pejoratively called, in fact fail to explain why, if secret societies and ruling elites have such vast power to maneuver history and shape the future according to their plans, they accumulate so many failures and mistakes. Why does the world government project need centuries of work and preparation to be finally implemented? Certainly because the world does not function within the logic and continuity that they imagine, because the possibilities of possible worlds are not reduced to just one, because paradigms change without counterfeits, because, every day, man finds himself faced with the tiring task of choosing between interchangeable values and objectives that move over time and are not all on the same plane. Conspiracy theories serve both to boost our propensity to arrive at the real truth, the deep structure beyond mere appearance, surface structure, and to give vent to our repressed hostilities, offering the illusion that the world that surrounds us is full of meaning, a world that must surrender to our own image. As historical agents are linked to events and characteristically described as greedy, cunning, cheating, warlike, destructive and capable of destruction, we glimpse a pattern outlined by a consistent plot and the possibility of entering through a simple and precise path, that of good versus evil, a simplification that praises and works. The inseparability between religions, sects, flying saucers and conspiracy theories is perhaps due to the fact that they share the same type of paradox and the same intrinsically structural nature, real and tangible and intangible at the same time. The interference of forces that are not easily identifiable represents, precisely, one of the delicate points of any study with the purpose of redesigning the political panorama in recent decades. In fact, the most attentive observer has not escaped certain evidence of the action of strange mechanisms in supporting the new situation that is taking shape based on the extraordinary influence that certain groups, organizations and foundations began to exert. One cannot, of course, underestimate the speed and peculiar characteristics with which sudden transformations occur, nor can one doubt the interference of an accelerating factor in the entire process. Viewed from this perspective, it is natural that questions arise regarding the origin of the forces that promote them, the advantages they seek to obtain and their real objectives. Behind successive governments, there is always the permanence of certain forces, certain principles. Stability like this can only be maintained by hidden powers that actually act behind the scenes. Changes in names, parties or labels mean nothing, they are nothing more than mere appearance, and the defenseless masses are satisfied with a little happiness in exchange for which they grant all the authority to take away their freedom under the guise of democracy. The basis of this control has always been the same, that is, to keep people in a state of ignorance, fear, confusion and constant war against themselves. The reason humanity is controlled is because the majority delegate responsibility for their destinies to the enlightened, who are on high, expecting the solutions to their problems to come from them, when many of these problems were created by these same, enlightened, who in turn, they claim that to meet this demand they need more power, which ends up becoming increasingly concentrated and centralized in their hands. It's the old revolutionary tactic of creating chaos and offering a way to restore order. Those who have used this method to control humanity in recent centuries pray from the same booklet and follow the same long-term agenda that is gradually reaching its culmination. In contrast, the greater the spiritual strength required for the heroic adventure of the soul, which is to preserve the autonomy of individual consciousness. Without being able to form a sufficiently accurate picture of the situation or fully identify the invisible forces that decide our destiny. Out of complacency, it is common to simply stigmatize as conspiracy theories everything that is derived from these networks of connections, which thus, camouflaged, they can continue constructing the truth according to their convenience and acting freely as if they did not exist and were just products of minds that are too suggestible, imaginative and paranoid. However, these networks of connections are well known and are arranged in a pyramid, at the top of which are the richest, most powerful and influential dynasties, foundations, companies and financial institutions on the planet, sponsors of revolutionary movements and feeders of the global vision of totalitarian control. All of this would be clear as a diamond if we weren't immersed in a reality in which not understanding anything becomes a demonstration of intelligence. Many continue to seek refuge in traditional religions that are decadent and weakened in their moral and spiritual authority, in wild mystical and esoteric sects or in long outdated ideologies that have already demonstrated their ineffectiveness and genocidal anger. Others give in to nihilism, hedonism or look for simplistic and comforting panaceas to escape responsibility. Still others become merely cynical and materialistic, proclaiming their devotion to money and consumption. Many are simply exhausted and have given up any attempt at action. In other words, while many persist in atavistic behaviors that only lead them to lose themselves and their own identities to the point of no longer recognizing themselves in them, to dangerous sectarian deviations, to the acceptance of the destruction of the true human community and the natural order, to the renunciation of civilization itself, a lot has happened in the world that completely escapes its understanding and its narrow horizons of vision. The main one is that the implementation of a global totalitarian government, designed to control the lives of everything and everyone, is in full swing. In the current situation in which the postmodern world finds itself, there is no longer any doubt that events are being directed by a power above governments, a power that controls the destiny of nations and humanity as a whole. The futuristic nightmare of fictions like 1984 and Brave New World is unfolding before our eyes and, as predicted, heading us towards a disguised form of totalitarianism. We are constantly monitored by security cameras and tracked by location and data collection devices. Microchipping the population is already being suggested, and in many cases, underway. The crises deepen, the problems become increasingly serious, complex and difficult to solve, and no light, except that of the Illuminati, seems to shine on the horizon. On the contrary, everything indicates a worsening of this apparently chaotic process, expressed in the Freemason motto Ordo ab Chao, order that comes from chaos, which could end in some type of catastrophe or miraculous solution. Expressions such as new era, ecological consciousness, planetary citizenship, biodiversity, multiculturalism, and similar others have been on the lips of everyone who has been repeating them without ceasing for at least 2 decades, as part of indoctrination for the acceptance of the totalitarian New World Order. Such a world government that has already been fully installed and controls all of humanity. A notorious example of this is the global financial collapse at the end of 2008 caused by the Bilderberg Group bankers after deceiving the middle class on the stock exchange, imploding the mortgage credit market of high risk and destroyed public confidence, generating losses of around $20 trillion United States dollars, millions of unemployed people and plunging the world into the worst recession since the Great Depression, right before our eyes and in a way that is not even more subtle, but hostile towards the which is willing to contradict him even in minimal aspects because, politically incorrect, is what the apocalypse foreshadowed as the kingdom of the Antichrist, seductive and apparently correct for a large portion of alienated, stupidified, lenient, amoral, cynical humanity, corrupt and deluded in their own passions and sins. And to force everyone to finally adhere to the collimated objectives of this new global dictatorial government, causes for good were invented, one of them being the ecological issue, a pretext for a countless number of planetary actions. The devastating union of the economic and political interests of the hidden international elites and the New Era movement gave rise to a new world culture based on camouflaged totalitarian principles based on the false claim that the excess consumption of energy and resources on the planet was killing the Earth, which they claimed to be a gigantic living and conscious organism called Gaia. And so that, Mother Nature, no longer suffers, as if they were imbued with the fairest and noblest intentions. And that is exactly how it sounds. We must drastically reduce the consumption of goods and resources. Now, the consequence of this strategy, which is nothing more than utopian madness, already fully implemented, hailed as the inevitable transition to a new global and tribal planetary society where everyone would live in harmony with Gaia, is nothing less than the dilapidation of the economies of the nations and the diversion of properties and all kinds of material resources to the cause of world government. How can the masses be so childishly deceived? Part of the answer lies in the subtle power of gradualism, the incremental steps that act like the proverbial frog in the pan of slowly heating water. You get so used to the gradual change that you hardly notice the next step. Current humanity seems to have reached the conclusion that man's nature is a source of increasingly unpredictable negative acts and that, therefore, man must distrust his fellow men. Because, according to the sentence created by Plautus 230 BC 180 BC and popularized by Hobbes 1588-1679, man is man's wolf, homo hominis lupus. It follows that current humanity has forged a world in which each person, with the desire to achieve happiness, thinks and believes that they must achieve it by imposing themselves on others. Therefore, it is not surprising, in a world where the expression, fight for life, has acquired a connotation it never had, that conspiracy theories have relevance and validity. It is no longer about man's struggle to dominate his habitat. It is now, regrettably, about man's struggle to dominate man. With this conception, current humanity established its rules to achieve, paradoxically, happiness, which has never been so far from achieving it. Engaged in this fratricidal struggle of which she is convinced, she only manages to achieve incipient means of surviving, if at all, biologically, reduced to primary instincts and emptied of nobler purposes. Distrustful of itself, today's humanity is a desperate, selfish, dark and violent humanity that, despite fearing death, postponed as long as possible by appealing to all the resources of medicine and genetic engineering, generates death. The total power of the world government, labeled as the Illuminati, secret society.